Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I am joined on today's episode by Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman
Hey, that's me.
and writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey everyone.
All right, guys, so we don't have much news to talk about today, but there is some, so let's just jump right into it. HT, tell us about Disney's plans to reboot several popular Fox properties.
So Disney chief Robert Iger announced on an earnings call with investors that the studio is developing several reboots and reimaginings of Fox's family-friendly hits, including titles like Home Alone, Night at the Museum, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Cheaper by the Dozen. And these reboots would all be debuting on Disney Plus, according to a new report from Collider. So these are Fox's most recent family-friendly hits, apart from Cheaper by the Dozen, which is actually a remake in and of itself. So, and it seems like Disney Plus is building its titles and original content to be largely reboots in a sense, and recognizable IP. In addition to this, we're also seeing some Disney live-action remakes of its animated films like Lady and the Tramp, as well as just the Marvel and Star Wars titles. But that seems to be the strategy that Disney Plus is going forward in the upcoming streaming wars.
I mean, that's kind of depressing, isn't it? That Disney acquired Fox just to sort of push off some of these like remakes of Fox properties onto Disney Plus.
Yep, they can't just have these they can't just have these classics on their streaming platform as in the archives. They need to slap the Disney brand on it and put a little twist up. Apparently, the Home Alone reimagining, for example, would put a twist on the story and make it about a husband and wife who go to war with a young boy who has stolen something from them. So that's something along the lines of what we'll likely be seeing with these remakes.
Interesting.
That's not even Home Alone.
Yeah, what a bizarre. That's like it's a totally different concept.
Yeah, they could just make original movies themselves, but you got to have that IP, I guess, because that's Disney's strategy, and they're making a lot of money from it.
So, Brad, I was going to throw it to you and say, is there any hope that these projects could be, maybe better than we think, and maybe not quite as crass as we're making them out to be, but that particular synopsis or description of what they're planning to do with Home Alone it makes me even more worried than I was 30 seconds ago. Do you even with that in mind, do you think that there's any chance that these are going to be like worth seeking out, or do you think it's just mining these properties for name recognition alone?
I mean, there's always a chance. When it comes to stuff like this, I've tried to be a little more understanding and less judgmental when it comes to remakes and reboots. There have been some really good remakes and reboots. There have been some really bad remakes and reboots, and so there's always a chance that they could figure something out. Disney does have a lot of talented people working for them, and a lot of talented people who want to work for them. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for some of these movies to work out. I just wish that they would invest their time in making things that really haven't been done yet, or at least adapting more interesting stories that come from other, media. I see this slate of titles, and I can't help but get frustrated that they scrapped the Mouse Guard adaptation, which looked fantastic, all in favor of doing, more remakes like this. So that is frustrating. But yeah, it's kind of just a wait and see scenario for me. I don't know what to expect from the quality of these movies that are going to Disney Plus, but I guess I'll be hoping for the best.
Yeah. Do we know any other notable information about any of these particular projects, or is it still too early to talk about casting and stuff like that?
It's still a little too early. The Home Alone reboot is the one that we have the most information on. Apparently, Borat scribe Dan Mazer is being eyed to direct the film, while Melissa McCarthy is reportedly being eyed to star in it as one of the parents. So, but other than that, we don't know if that's settled yet, and the report notes that the studio hasn't actually settled on a direction.
Huh. Okay, well, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But speaking of Disney, let's talk a little bit more about Disney and its relationship with these new Fox properties. Brad, tell us what else we learned from Bob Iger in this recent earnings call.
Yeah, so part of the reason Disney is looking at using these Fox properties in this way is because their third quarter earnings weren't up to snuff as far as their own analysis and predictions hoped that they would be when it came to reeling in some of the profit from the Fox movies they purchased in their acquisition of 20th Century Fox. The biggest blame for this is being placed on Dark Phoenix, which severely underperformed at the box office this summer. It was a big budget movie. I think it was around $150 million, and it only ended up making around 60 in the United States. It was far below what an X-Men movie usually earns, far below what Disney hoped the movie would earn, and some other Fox movies have just been relatively disappointing as well. So for the time being, they are halting pretty much every film that Fox had in development, with the exception of James Cameron's Avatar movies and apparently the Planet of the Apes franchise. And the latter one's kind of interesting because ever since War for the Planet of the Apes came out, we haven't heard about any new Planet of the Apes movies being in the works. So there must have been something that was in development or an idea being tossed around of picking up the franchise where that one ended, perhaps moving even further towards the timeline of the original Planet of the Apes movie, maybe even remaking the original Planet of the Apes, or having a franchise that actually brought us to that point so that they could remake it with the modern motion capture technology that we have today. But otherwise, Disney is they're kind of keeping it chill with the Fox properties, and their hope is to, once they get everything kind of back in order and refocused, to release about 10 Fox movies each year. But some of those, as many as half of those, could be movies that end up going to Disney Plus or Hulu.
That's disappointing, because when you said 10 each year, I was like, okay, 10 theatrical movies from Fox, that's not bad. But if half of them end up going to the streaming services, I feel like they're just going to get lost in the sea of content, even if they end up being surprisingly good or better than we think. But man, that is just, I mean, this is sort of like, I can't say this is surprising because we saw this coming as soon as all of the talk even began about Disney acquiring Fox. But just to hear that, these plans are being put in place, it's still, I can't help but feel a little bit depressed about all of this.
The good news is that they're not messing with Fox Searchlight, and they will continue to do what they've been doing.
Let me ask you guys something. Do you think, so 2019 is arguably going to be Disney's biggest year ever? So already I think they have announced that they've made more money at the box office than, I forget what the headline was that I saw recently, but they've already made something like $7 or $8 billion or something worldwide at the box office, and it's August, right? So by the end of the year, when they have Frozen 2 and they have The Rise of Skywalker and whatever, I'm sure I'm forgetting some other big Disney property, but we've talked for so long about how 2019 is going to be this massive year for Disney. Once this year is over, and they have done the live action remakes of a lot of the super popular 90s Disney animated era. I know we have Mulan coming up, and I know we have some other things sort of in the works, Cruella and stuff like that. But do you guys think that there's any way that Disney is going to be able to top themselves and box office wise with what they've done in 2019?
Probably not, if only because this year has this kind of perfect storm of remaking two of Disney's biggest hits from the 90s, the culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first era in Avengers Endgame, and the end of the Skywalker saga in The Rise of Skywalker. And I feel like those titles alone are really what will be boosting Disney's box office this year. And I don't think that we'll see the likes of that combination all in one year again.
But like, HT, do you think that it's short-sighted for Disney to sort of essentially relegate these Fox properties to Disney Plus and only say, we're gonna pick about 10 Fox movies we're gonna make per year, especially if, like, let's pretend there's no way that they're going to be able to capture the box office glory that they've established this year in the future. Doesn't it make more sense for them to sort of dip deeper into the Fox archives and like make more stuff that's recognizable and try to expand their empire even further? I don't know. It just seems like I don't know. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but what do you think about that?
I mean, I for sure think it's short-sighted. I do think that Disney, despite being a box office titan that controls the globe, plays things very safe. And the fact that Fox had a dip in its earnings scared Disney enough that they were going to cut a lot of the in development Fox projects is a little bit strange for the way that like they act strangely for the amount of power and money and resources that they have.
Right, because like if they're worried now about, oh man, we're not living up to projections or whatever, like think about what happens after 2019 when they have this, peak year this year, and everything else from here on out theoretically is going to be slightly less than that. Like I don't know, it just seems like it's like I don't know, alarmist is the wrong word, but strangely conservative even for Disney, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think that. I'm not really concerned about it though, but because I still think that it's Disney is doing fine, and that they the competition to top themselves is not a big worry. I'm just more concerned about whether other studios will be able to hold any competition or a candle to Disney, and just the fact that they're pulling back on Fox films just lessens the diversity amongst films that we have in the box office. It's my own gripes with the landscape at large, but I do think Disney is probably kind of disseminating or like reaching out to different mediums. It's investing more in the streaming platforms and everything, so maybe we won't see all of its successes in one spot, but we'll see it just spread out more across different mediums.
Yeah, maybe my issue is more with like the way the conversation is framed. Like, they're having a disappointing quarter, and it's like, Jesus Christ, this is 2019. This is the year where you guys are going to dominate. Like, just calm down a little bit. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on to dueling John Henry movies. First of all, do you guys know anything about John Henry? I'll just say for me, the only exposure I had to this folk hero was from I think it was a 1995 movie called Tall Tale, where Patrick Swayze played Pecos Bill, and like Paul Bunyan and John Henry and these other folk heroes like teamed up to help this kid save his homestead or something like that. But do you guys have any exposure to the John Henry lore at all?
I remember, I think, reading whatever about it when I was in like elementary school, probably. But beyond that, my experience also comes from that same movie you just mentioned.
HT, did you ever see that movie, or do you know anything about John Henry?
I don't. I think I'm a little bit after that movie that you're talking about, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
So in folklore, John Henry was this like blue collar worker who was super, super strong. He was an African American folk hero who was so strong that he agreed to race a steam powered rock drilling machine in a contest by just basically using like his bare hands, or maybe like a hammer or something. And this machine was using steam and all this like new technology, and the goal was to basically like smash their way through a mountainside, like to create a tunnel or something. And he ended up winning, but he died because his heart gave out right as the competition ended. So I guess it's like a sort of a metaphor of down home like grit and determination versus like encroaching technology and stuff like that. So anyway, there are 2 John Henry movies in the works. I think we may have mentioned one starring Dwayne Johnson because we learned about this last October. Dwayne Johnson is going to be starring in a John Henry movie called John Henry and the Statesman, which that name sort of has like an Avengers kind of name to it, or like
this is a franchise title.
Yeah, and I don't know if any other characters are going to be involved in that. It's still too far out for us to know, but we know that Jake Kasdan, the guy who directed Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, is going to be directing him in that movie, and it's going to be for Netflix. We don't have a release date on that one yet, but there is like a brief teaser for the film that was already released back in October, so I've embedded that in the article that I wrote about this, and you can find that in the show notes of this episode. And then yesterday, it was announced that Terry Crews, who starred in TV shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and movies like Deadpool 2, is also going to be playing John Henry in a theatrical feature film called John Henry. And this one's going to be a modern-day movie set in L.A., where it's being referred to as a dramatic thriller, and the premise is that after John Henry abandons a crime-riddled life for a peaceful one in Los Angeles, he crosses paths with two immigrant kids who are running from the leader of his former gang, and he's forced to confront the violence of his past life in hopes of saving them. And Ludacris is co-starring in this movie. This is the writing and directing debut of somebody named Will Forbes, who I've never heard of before. This is the only credit that he has on his IMDb. And Saban Films is looking to put this in theaters in the first quarter of 2020. So it's sort of ironic that this, John Henry, this folk story that's built around the concept of a race, it is now the subject of its own race in Hollywood between two competing films. So I'm guessing that the Terry Crews version is going to hit theaters before the Netflix version gets made, because Dwayne Johnson is just so busy these days. He's got a lot of projects where he's like arguably one of the busiest people in Hollywood. So we've got a straight up deep impact Armageddon situation on our hands again. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention so you can draw the line in the sand and pick which John Henry movie you're gonna see, if any.
I think I'm just gonna actually seek out Tall Tale again, because I just had to go look this up to remind myself. And Patrick Swayze's in this as Pecos Bill. Oliver Platt is Paul Bunyan. Nick Stahl is the main character. Stephen Lang is in it. Jared Harris, Catherine O'Hara. There's an uncredited roles for William H. Macy and Burgess Meredith. This movie, I need to go back and watch this movie. I remember watching this as a kid, but I haven't seen it since then. I need to try and find it to watch it again.
Wow, yeah, that movie is called Tall Tale, if anybody wants to seek that out. I remember watching it a bunch of times as a kid, but I think I was too young to even know who most of those people were. But hearing you list that name, that's like a murderer's row of amazing character actors. So maybe Tall Tale is worth another look. I'm wondering if it's going to hold up to like modern scrutiny, but we'll see. Maybe. Let me know, Brad, if you end up seeking that out again.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, so let's move on to our next story, and that is Wesley Snipes has joined Eddie Murphy in Coming to America 2. HT, what do we know here?
Yes, Wesley Snipes has joined the cast of Coming to America. That's coming with the word 2 written out as 2, the number. In a new role, he will be playing a new character named General Izzy, a man who rules the neighboring nation to Zamunda, the fictional wealthy African nation from which Akeem, Eddie Murphy's crown prince, hails. This sequel will follow Akeem as he returns to New York City to find his long-lost son, and will supposedly be accompanied by his best friend and personal aide, played by Arsenio Hall, who is the only other original cast member confirmed to return. So that's all we really know for this film so far. We don't know much about how much of the original cast is set to return, but this will be the reunion of Eddie Murphy with Wesley Snipes and Craig Brewer, who the trio last collaborated on a documentary called Dolomite Is My Name. So that's probably why Snipes was brought on to this film. And yes, Craig Brewer is the director of Coming to America.
So Brad, I know you're a big fan of this movie. What do you think about this news?
I am down to see Wesley Snipes do something that is relevant again. He's been away for a while, and I think him doing a comedy is especially fun. I love Wesley Snipes in White Men Can't Jump, and I think him teaming up with Eddie Murphy for the sequel, which I'm very excited about, is good news. I love the original Coming to America. If you haven't watched it in a long time, or if you've never seen it, you should go out of your way to find it and track it down, because it's one of those great 1980s comedies that actually still holds up and is still hilarious today.
Yeah, that's good to know. HC, you watched this relatively recently too, right?
Yeah, I watched it pretty recently. Did I talk about it on the water cooler? I feel like I did.
Have, yeah.
But yeah, it surprised me. It holds up really well. Like, the comedy is still really sharp. It's so funny. Eddie Murphy is great in it. And yeah, I'm actually quite excited to see Wesley Snipes stretch his comedy chops again, because he's been kind of, just chilling and occasionally showing up to do gritty roles. I get the feeling that this role will be somewhat along the lines of a typical Wesley Snipes character, a stoic general of sorts, but it'll be fun to see him match wits with Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, I'm looking at Wesley Snipes' IMDb page right now, and it's sort of a sad state of affairs there. Like he popped up in Chirac, which I think was a Spike Lee movie that I never saw, but that was back in 2015. He was in Expendables 3, and yeah, he's just been like in a lot of direct-to-video stuff. Even before that, it was like probably Blade Trinity in 2004 was like the last really big project that he had. So I imagine Coming to America is going to be a pretty big movie when that actually comes out. So, yeah, this could be maybe the beginning of a comeback for Wesley Snipes. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually happens. Okay, let's talk about the Emmys. There was an announcement that the Emmys this year will not have a host, but instead will offer many surprises. So Charlie Collier, the CEO of Fox, announced today during a Television Critics Association panel that Fox, which is the home of the Emmys this year, has decided, along with the Television Academy, that they are not going to have a host. And I guess this is sort of like on the heels of this year's Oscars, which also did not have a host. And this year's Oscars actually saw an increase in viewership over last year's. So maybe Fox is hoping to sort of get a similar result. They've also mentioned that the reason, or one of the reasons, or I guess a factor in the decision, is that this year marks a sort of special year in terms of a lot of America's favorite TV shows like Game of Thrones and Veep and Empire and The Big Bang Theory have all come to an end. And I think the thought here is that by not having a host, they'll be able to sort of pay more tribute and pay more attention to those shows and maybe like bring out the cast and do some special things there. So there's a lot of sort of rumbling about what these sort of surprise kind of things might be. Collier mentioned that there will be entertainment, there will be an opening number. If you look at the trade-offs in a show like the Emmys, so often it's a trade-off between the opening acts and using the time elsewhere. There will be many surprises. It will be entertaining. Variety has a rumor that some of those surprises may actually involve on-stage reunions for cast members of shows like Seinfeld and Friends and ER, which are all celebrating really notable anniversaries this year. I think it's the 30th anniversary of Seinfeld and the 25th anniversary of both Friends and ER. So that could be something that could maybe pull people in. And I wanted to sort of toss this out there to you guys, because I know that, you know, there are people that like live and breathe these award shows. And I think it's safe to say that the three of us do not find ourselves, you know, among those people, but still, you know, we pay attention to this stuff for out of curiosity and work stuff. But do you guys have like a personal interest in the Emmys? Brad, I know you watch a lot of TV and seem to be more up on this stuff than I am anyway. Does the idea of not having a host for the Emmys, does that excite you, impact you in any way? What do you think?
I actually think I've been kind of terrible about keeping up with TV lately. But as far as the Emmys not having a host, I don't think it matters all that much. As we saw, you know, we didn't need a host, you know, for the Oscars to make it work. If anything, it made things a little bit easier. And since the Emmys is such a crowded award slate already, even more so than the Oscars, since they have to present both comedy and drama, and then there's also the TV movie and all that stuff. It's a lot to fit into a ceremony that without making it feel overstuffed. So I think getting rid of the host will probably only help in this situation.
HT, do you care at all about the Emmys? Is this something that you know, even if you didn't have to cover it for work, let's say, would you be interested in tuning in and watching it? And like, what would you care about? You know, is the host something that you would tune in for, or what do you think?
No, I don't really care much for I think Emmys hosts have had a better track record than Oscars hosts, and I've enjoyed some of the opening monologues and things we've seen from that. I especially enjoyed Andy Samberg's Emmy hosting gig. That was pretty fun. But I am okay without a host. I do think that like they've done better with hosting than the Oscars for sure, but I don't think it will suffer for not having a host.
Yeah, I think I actually enjoyed the Oscars this year without a host. I think it sort of seemed to run a little bit smoothly, and you didn't have to sort of suffer through some of the monologue stuff that can go
so
really go either way.
painless.
Yeah. So one last thing that I wanted to bring up, sort of along the same lines of award show discussion, is that the BAFTAs, which are the British equivalent of the Oscars, have decided to add a casting category to the 2020 Film and TV Awards. So this is the first new category that it's introduced since 1999, when they introduced the Outstanding Debut honor, which is kind of a cool category in and of itself that I wish the Oscars would do, because that would be a really good way to sort of shine some light on up and coming people that maybe wouldn't be able to compete elsewhere. But anyway, the casting category, that's sort of an interesting thing. I feel like in terms of the Academy Awards, the Oscars, the discussion, the prominent primary discussion that I've heard over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years at this point, has been about adding a stunt category. That seems to be one that has a lot of like a groundswell of support and like grassroots campaigns and stuff that I've seen, and a lot of directors and stunt people have talked a lot about that. I've not heard much rumbling about a casting category, but I'm wondering what you guys think about this, like in terms of if the Oscars were to follow suit here and add a casting category. Is that something that you think, a department that you think would be worth, I guess, celebrating or acknowledging or whatever, over something like stunts? HT, what do you think?
I do think casting plays a prominent role in how well a TV or movie does. I do think that casting relates more to TV than movies. I get the feeling if there was a casting category at the Oscars, we would see a lot of just Marvel movies there. But I'm not opposed to it. I just think it's something that feels a little bit more Golden Globe-esque than Oscars.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Brad, what do you think? Would you want to see casting over something like that? I mean, first of all, let me just, for listeners who are like, why would you frame it this way? The entire notion of judging art and bestowing awards on this stuff is sort of ludicrous on its face to me anyway. So like award shows at large, I find kind of arbitrary with the way that they draw the lines on these things. So I'm not personally suggesting that stunts are like quote unquote more important than casting. I just, in terms of like the discussion that I've seen recently and like the groundswell movement kind of stuff, that's where I'm getting this from. So I don't like personally have like any ill will toward casting directors or anything like that. But Brad,
no, Ben, why do you hate stunt people?
Yeah, either casting people or stunt people. But Brad, what do you think?
No, I actually think that this would be a good category to include in the Oscars, if only just to expand, I guess, the knowledge of what goes into making a movie. Casting directors are an integral part of making a movie what it is, by finding the right people and getting the right people in front of a director in order to figure out who is best for any given part. There are a lot of people who are discovered simply because the casting director found them and put them in the right spot at the right time, and they became huge stars. And there are just as many adults who found a full-fledged career in acting simply because they were put in the right part by the right casting director. If you want to know more about what a casting director does and the intricacies behind it, and like I guess really the art behind it, there's this great documentary called Casting By. It's available on Amazon Prime right now, and it dives into the whole process, what it is. It focuses on casting director Marion Doherty, and it talks about some of the other famous casting directors who are out there, and has a lot of anecdotes about how certain actors were put into roles and just that whole process. And it's a fascinating insight into that side of the making movies.
I've never heard of that. It's really cool. I'm going to add that to my queue. For me, the only people I can think of that are like name casting directors, like I guess A-list ones that I know of, even as somebody who like obviously immerses myself in the minutia of Hollywood and its players, is like Allison Jones, who did the casting for like Freaks and Geeks and Arrested Development and stuff like that, and then Nina Gold, who did the casting for Game of Thrones, and she did it for Attack the Block. I'm wondering if the fact that the two casting directors that I know are women means that that position is maybe primarily dominated by women, and if so, if that would be a cool, I guess a separate reason, a separate, I don't know, an additional reason to add this to the Oscars, because Hollywood movie making is generally dominated by men, like all these categories and stuff. So if that is true and casting directors are like, statistically more likely to be women, that would just be like a cool way to put more women front and center, and sort of like, kids watch the Oscars and look at that as like an aspirational kind of thing, and like seeing more women accept awards up there could influence the next generation of filmmakers and casting directors. So that would be kind of a cool thing. And I think stunt coordinators and stunt performers and all that stuff are primarily men, as anybody knows. So that's just like not necessarily the primary reason why one should be chosen over the other, but like a cool benefit if casting were to actually come to the Oscars. So I never really thought about that.
A question.
Yeah.
Does the BAFTA casting category, is that awarded to the casting director, or is it something that's more akin to the best ensemble category, for example, that we see at the SAG Awards?
That is a very good question. BAFTAs awards exist to recognize excellence across the industry, and we are delighted this year to be including a highly skilled work of casting directors for the first time. That's a quote from BAFTA chair Pippa Harris. So it sounds like they're specifically singling out the casting directors in this case.
Okay.
So yeah, that's good. As she said, we hope this award will also help to promote an understanding of casting, and look forward to seeing who will be the first winner in February. So it seems like a specific person is going to walk away with the trophy in this one.
That's cool.
All right. Well, I think that's the end of today's episode of Slash Film Daily. I will link to that casting by documentary in the show notes. I'll also put a link to the how the Avengers Endgame Final Battle was made video that I made, and I sort of plugged that on the show yesterday, but I'll leave that in there in case you haven't had a chance to watch that yet. Before we go, where can people find more of your work online? HC, let's start with you.
You can find me writing every day at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Hoai-Tran Bui.
And Brad?
Always at slashfilm.com. Also on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton, and my own podcast, Go Flix Yourself, FLIX, available on iTunes and other podcasting platforms.
You can find me writing at slashfilm.com as well. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ben Pearson, and you can find more about all of the stories that we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com and linked inside the show notes of this episode. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps, and send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, sorry to bring this up so late in the podcast, Peter, who's gone at a magic convention until I think tomorrow is when he comes back, he forwarded me an email from Schwinn from Grand Rapids, who said, I just have to ask if somebody had a loudly meowing cat in the background while they were recording the water cooler episode, because I swear I was hearing meows. Love the show, thanks. And I think I heard that as well. I could not edit that out because it was like during somebody saying a word, so I couldn't minimize the meowing, so I apologize for leaving that in the episode. That is there, yes. And I also wanted to note too that I think Peter's experimenting with having ads on the show. So if you've downloaded the show over the past couple days and you've experienced getting ads somewhere, he's messing around with some experiments in that regard. So don't be alarmed if you hear ads. That's what's going on. I'm sure when he gets back, he can speak more fully to that once his experimentation is complete. But we'll figure out what's going on there. But yes, in any case, please don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word about the show. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.